Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of Marvel's Inhumans. Very good premiere. I've been very excited to check this out because you may or may not know this. Once again, I'm not that familiar with comic books. This is no exception with the Inhumans. Because prior to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 2, I never even knew that Inhumans were a thing in the Marvel comics. You know, I always knew of mutants, never knew about Inhumans, which I guess, it's almost weird to say mutants can... Nevertheless, that's a whole thing in itself. But nevertheless, very good premiere. Obviously, a lot of this I already knew, like a lot of the story, about Maximus betraying Black Bolt and everything. But it is nice to obviously see the whole full picture because a lot of that stuff was out of context. And now we kind of understand a little bit more about everything. Because another thing I was curious about is where this would fall in line with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's like this series coincides with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Come like, okay, they're on the moon, right? So, because that brought up the question too of if they're on the moon, what does this mean about humans on Earth? It's basically a long time ago, most Inhumans left to be on the moon, to build a new home there. I guess it comes down to that whole humans found out what we were, so we had to get away. There were the ones that stayed behind, like the ones that God, I'm about to call her the wrong name, Daisy. Her mom, that group that she kind of ran, that community, it's like them as well as others are all descendants of those Inhumans. And it seems like this whole thing is Black Bolt's plan is because he knows about Terrigenesis going crazy, because he even knows about the water, the whole fish oil situation. Doesn't know specifically fish oil because Karnak just referenced the water incident, so it's like they're aware of it, that created Terrigenesis and a lot of the Inhumans. Now they're not as they are not as full-blooded Inhumans as everyone on the moon is. So but basically, it seems like his plan was to get all the humans from Earth and bring them to the moon because this is where they're supposed to be. So once again, tying into the whole Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. thing, which kind of explains the season 4 finale, which if you haven't seen the season 4 finale, spoiler alert, was the whole thing with Coulson looking, I was like, okay, what's that whole space thing about? It's like, now it makes a little more sense because it's like Inhumans, being on the moon and everything. So it's like, okay, I guess that's where that could be go. I wonder, I'm wondering in retrospect, how much of that ending, besides just that, even them being taken and everything, was that connected in Humans or not? Nevertheless, also I'm curious, one thing that crossed my mind too is what is Hive's connection to that? Was it the Inhuman? Were they the ones that sealed Hive up in that other world a long time ago, or were it humans that did that? Was he just kind of too much of a terror that they had to lock him up? Because it seemed to me Hive is kind of the equivalent to a king amongst Inhumans, you would think, but for Black Bolt to be the king and everything, and there being a long line of kings before him and stuff like that, I don't know. It just kind of interesting to me. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode. Obviously, you kind of got to see a lot of the lay of the lands and how things are set up. Kind of get to learn about people, kind of their abilities. Obviously, Medusa with her hair, Gorgon being almost I don't know what you'd call him. I guess he's more like a satyr, because I was about to say, I guess a cross between a satyr and a minotaur, because it seems like he probably has the strength of a minotaur, but obviously his body more reflects a satyr. But nevertheless, Karnak, I still don't know exactly what his power was, because at first I was like, okay, is his power seeing the future or something? And it seems like it's connected to probability, that basically he's like, oh, you shouldn't have given me a choice. So it's the moment a choice is presented to him, his power activates, or it allows him to kind of see the outcome if he does this, and that. But there's also a point where he was when he was on Earth, he was looking at the compass and everything. And it seems like he can have, I really don't know how to narrow in what his power is exactly. Also, Crystal, too, because it seemed like at one point she's messing with rolling a ball around, she was freezing it. But the moment that lady, I think her name's Zoran, walked in, she shot fire at her or something. So it's her power just controlling elements in general, or what is that? Then there's also the teleporting dog, Lockjaw. That's kind of an interesting setup. How does that come about? A dog, for one, getting that big and just... I don't know. A really interesting thing I pulled away from this episode, I thought, was kind of the whole caste system. Because I kind of knew about because of the trailers and everything, I kind of knew about Maximus not being an Inhuman. It's just, he has the potential to be one. So, I mean, because their whole caste system is built by those who have powers and who don't, essentially. It's if you don't have powers, you work in a mine. you have powers, you kind of get some other position and stuff like that. Maximus being the only exception because his brother is king, so now that's why he kind of has the position that he has. So, what took me for a loop with this whole situation, what kind of twisted, like, obviously, like, I knew Maximus was going to betray Black, kind of do the whole, God, what is it? What's the word I'm looking for? Coup. I knew the whole coup thing was going to happen, so that was no surprise, obviously, because the trailer set that up and everything. But what took me by surprise was that the humans on Earth were working for him, because like it's like, oh, the ones that attacked Triton and that girl at the beginning of the episode, and then attacked Gorgon too. And I was like, oh, they're working for you. How'd you set that up? I mean, because he's got this whole mentality about going to Earth and making Earth their own, because it's like, we've lived here for such a long time. We've lived, like, shut ourselves off and everything. So it's like, in his own twisted way, it's like he is coming from a rational place of like, oh, we should do things this way. But Black Bolt doesn't want to go to Earth because he already sees the problems that we already see in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. of like the divide between humans and Inhumans. And it's like he knows if they all go to Earth, it's going to turn into a war. And he wants to stop bloodshed on both sides, But I mean, more so his own people. But it doesn't look like he detests humans, because when he's getting arrested and everything, he goes with the flow, mainly because he doesn't want to speak, which I was curious. I figured it had to have something to do with his powers, but once again, not being familiar with comic books or humans at all, I was curious what his power is. It seems like it's like a supersonic wave, and I guess depending on his emotion and how much, what kind of, like, he sends out vocal vibrations or something like that, because it seems like apparently that's how he accidentally killed his parents. They were like, he was like yelling at him almost like, why, and it like boom, they like not necessarily evaporated, but they just went like, I guess he just like his voice was so powerful that it ended up like breaking them up into nothing, and it's like the wall is cracked and you see like almost like splatter from them, but it's hard to really see what his power is. Like I said, it is like a powerful sonic boom, but I was curious, like, depending on the level of his voice, does it change? If he whispers, would it be like a little jab, Because like later on in the episode, when he was getting hit by those batons, he kind of let out a ooh, and it sent the car flying. So it does seem like the car wasn't eviscerated or just like reduced to nothing. It's like, no, it just got crumpled a little bit and pushed. To be fair, that's a metal box, compared to a human body that's just flesh and bone. So maybe that's different there. But I'm thinking that might be how he balances powers. It's to the point he can't control. And I assume that's probably being true to him in the comic books. He probably doesn't speak at all, because the entire episode he's using sign language, because he doesn't want to talk at all, because if he talks, he'll hurt somebody. So it's like, that sucks. I mean, it also seems like a lot of people feared him when he was younger because of that. He ended up killing his parents, so I guess the whole royalty situation got thrust on him immediately. It seems like the only person that wasn't afraid of him was Medusa. So, even in that sense, it's kind of interesting, because the way Maximus kind of talks about it, seems like Medusa and him were very close when they were younger, but she ended up being with Black Bolt, and it's almost like he's almost like, oh, don't you regret it, don't you? And she's like, no, I don't. And he's like, I can tell you do. You're always terrible at lying. It's like basically he wants to be with Medusa because he has feelings for her, always has, but had to watch her be with his brother. So because, like I said, it just seems like she's the only one that wasn't afraid of him. So I mean, to be fair, it's like he didn't know what he was capable of at that time. Like, because it seems in this, they still don't know what someone's power is until they really experiment and find out what it is. So maybe at that time, no one knew what his power was. But just to speak words and be able to kill people, it's kind of, I mean, not in that direct sense, but I mean, technically speaking, like if he speaks, he could like hurt or kill someone. So I also felt really bad for Medusa in this episode too, because of the whole situation with her hair. It seems like it's just your hair getting shed off, but it's like her hair is an extension of her, not just her, but her powers as an Inhuman too. So probably without her hair, she probably feels like a human, because it does seem like there is kind of that little bit of a, because even Crystal was like, oh yeah, you're nothing more than a human, saying that to, Maximus. So, because it's like, for them, it's like, they're not humans in the same sense, because it's like, well, Maximus was never born on Earth. He's always lived on the moon. He's grown up here. This is his home. So he's not like just some regular human, even though it seems like he kind of gets treated like one. Even like regular people who work in the mines call him out for it, because it's like, it's not fair, going back to what I said earlier, he should be working in the mines, but because he's the king's brother, circumstances, made him an exception and everything. But like going back to what I was saying about Medusa, it seems like her hair is more like not just her powers, but also it's an extension of herself. Like cutting off her hair is probably the equivalency of like cutting off one of her arms, because it's not just a thing, it's like a living part, it's like a living part of her, so that just sucks. But I think it also comes back to the fact of maybe it makes her feel a little powerless without her powers, because that's kind of where her power is tied into. So, and I figured I might as well go ahead and add this just because it was in my head even before the show aired. So I figured I might as well do this. Every once in a while I gotta break down and be like, oh, actors and connections and stuff like that. An interesting thing about the show is two different actors. Let's first take Serinda Swan, who plays Medusa. Basically, it's funny when you think about it, because she was previously, one of her shows she did in the past was a show called Breakout Kings. And said show, which was a very good show, sadly got canceled after the second season, but nevertheless, she also shared that show. She was also co-starred in that show with Malcolm Goodwin, as well as Jimmy Simpson. But Malcolm Goodwin, who now plays Clive on iZombie, which is based on a Vertigo comic, which is under the DC umbrella, and then she went off and did a Marvel show, so that's why I'm like, it's kind of funny how that happened. And the whole same thing also happened with Ewan Rion. I never know how to pronounce his name. I know him best. I mean, obviously he's in Game of Thrones, but obviously I know him personally best as playing Simon in Misfits, who was also in that show with Joseph Gilgun, who currently plays Cassidy on Preacher, another Vertigo series, which is under the umbrella of DC, which now Ewan is in a Marvel show. Once again, it's just interesting how the divide works like that. It's just like connections like that. It's just funny the moment I really thought about it. But nevertheless, getting back to the main show itself, it's kind of interesting that Lockjaw ended up sending them all. They're all in Hawaii, but they're just different places in Hawaii. So, because I'm also curious, like, just with the setup and everything, it does make you wonder, will this eventually, like, get S.H.I.E.L.D.'s attention? I mean, once again, that depends on, like, where after season 4 this took place. Is it, like, during season 4? Is it afterwards? I am curious, because it's like, I'm surprised, like, because you could be like, because all this attention they're getting, being Inhumans and stuff like that. It's just, I don't know, it's just kind of interesting. Like, immediately my brain is like, when it's all said and done, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s going to show up at the final episode of this or whatever, aren't they? I don't know, that was just me thinking. But, like, I mean, to be fair, I guess in Lockjaw's defense, he's just a dog, so it's like, he's just like, okay, I got the general area. Is that location? I might be off a little bit, but nevertheless. So many things on so many different fronts. Obviously, you have Black Bolt being arrested. It's kind of interesting that he is accepting everything. Once again, though, he is the one that's not trying to start a war with the humans. So, like, he fought a little bit because, I mean, he's not from Earth, so he doesn't understand the concept of paying for clothes and stuff like that. So he ended up walking away with them. But he didn't fight. I did appreciate that, like him just taking off the handcuffs and being like, huh? Oh, and he's signing and everything. It's like, oh, I'm gonna go with you. I'm gonna work this with it, because he's trying to respect their customs and everything. So he's like, if this is what they're saying I'm supposed to do to avoid, any like causing issues for him or his people. Once again, not trying to start a war. I guess that's why he's complying. But it's just like when you look at him in certain ways, he kind of responds. It's almost like, yeah, kind of cocky, don't you? Just like the way, like the little smirk he has on his face sometimes. Like I said, when he took the handcuffs off, and like, yeah, okay, like. I don't know, it's almost like he looks down to them to a certain extent, but maybe that's just a personality flaw of just being like, oh yeah, he's kind of a little cocky, which I think is something Maximus kind of hates about him anyway. I don't know, that was just something I thought was kind of interesting. Also, you had Gorgon, I don't know why I keep saying it weird, who met up with the those guys, the surfboards who saved him because he was trying to go out in the water to find Triton, but not much of a much for water, so they saved him, like, oh, you're Inhuman and everything, and they're like, oh, he's like, I'm from the moon, and they're like, oh, that's cool. And even when he's like, you might want to be careful because bad guy, people are going to show up, this is going to turn into a fight, they're like, I mean, like, they're basically like, a little trouble's a little fun, which is kind of interesting, because like this is their first interactions with humans at all in general. So you had Medusa riding on that bus, which is kind of interesting when she took on, I think the lady who serves Maximus, her name is Zoran, wasn't expecting Medusa to take her down the way she did, like stabbing her. It's like, once again, she doesn't really have her powers. I was like, oh, she's dead. I was like, oh, I was kind of thinking she was going to be around a while. Oh, she is, because she ended up healing herself because she's not dead. It's like she did something with her hands and she ended up healing her wounds. Once again, no clear 100% picture about what some of the people's abilities are. I'm wondering, is Maximus 100% like human? Is there no possibility of his powers generating? Or is it just one of those things where it's like, I'm curious, like, is it a situation where like eventually Genesis takes a while to kick in, but it can eventually do that? And if someone who's working the mind develops powers, what does that mean? Does their status change or what? Or is there just like a lost cause of like the moment that happened? Because it's probably been a couple years, you know? So like Black Bolt had his powers when he was like, probably a teenager, so it's kind of like arguably like, well, Maximus will probably never get his. It's probably like that. It's just kind of like a look. I mean, how he looks at it, it's just like an antiquated system and a luck of the draw. So it's like that's not how you properly lead, and people, you're just going to divide them. So, and it's only, like I said, from one perspective, you look at it, it's like you can understand why he's doing it, but the fact of the matter is he didn't go about it the right way and everything. The fact of the matter is, argue can be like, well, he's always been in his brother's shadow. It's like, oh, I've never had powers. His brother has powers. He's a king. He has the woman that Maximus loves. So it's just like, you have everything I want. Nah, forget that. I'm going to take it. So it's like, it's a combination of wanting to do the right thing for his people, but also because he's power hungry. He's never had power before, so obviously he wants to take that power and make it his own. So. But what I thought was kind of interesting too, and I'd love to kind of learn more about it, is Crystal. It seems like her and Medusa's mom, well, parents, not just their mom, but their mom and dad, seemed like they were very against like the royal family, at least how they ran things, like this whole monarchy and caste system. Which the monarchy, I guess, is fine, but as long as the right people are leading it, and they didn't agree with how Maximus and Black Bolt's parents were running it, so they ended up getting killed. But it's like, it's weird because now she's married into the family. She doesn't seem like she has an issue with Black Bolt, but I guess being brought into the family, she kind of let things go. But even Maximus is like, do you remember what it was like before your sister married into the family? So it makes you wonder, does Medusa on some level have any problems with Black Bolt, or does she kind of look at him as different and like, you know, because it seems like a thing they're setting up for Medusa is to like, they're always making it seem like, oh, like the one in this situation that has the power is all Black Bolt. She doesn't do anything. She's just there to translate for him essentially, but just like, no, I'm queen for a reason, and don't you ever forget that. So I am curious to see what Crystal decides to do, because Maximus is like, hey, don't forget what your parents did. They died because they wanted to fight the system, and now you're kind of being a part of that system. It's like, join with me and we can change that. So, which ultimately Maximus already kind of revealed it earlier. It's like he wants Crystal on his side, because if he can get someone connected to the royal family on his side, because she's essentially a princess, he can like legitimize his whole takeover a little bit more, is how I'm looking at it. But like I said, nevertheless, that's something, like I said, that whole situation, I'd love to kind of get a little further into that. So. And it's kind of an interesting thing, too, that Karnak seems like he's off kilter, because he fell off those rocks and banged his head, and he ended up walking in a circle. Like I said, still don't 100% understand how his powers work, but it seems like, I guess because his powers are connected to his brain, so now that he, you know, because I was curious, I was like, I'm wondering, does being on Earth affect their powers in any way? Like, did it dull their powers down? But it seems like Karnak's particular situation was, he just happened to hit his head, but that's also kind of why I was also warning about the whole Black Bolt situation, about how his powers work, or is that, like, could it be like a whole volume situation of his voice that would determine like what it does, or is it just like being on Earth affected it, you know? But it seems like Karnak's more so like, oh, like his head is connected to his powers, so the fact is he banged his head is kind of throwing his powers off kilter. So like I said, because like I said, he like had that compass kind of pop up, like, you know, and also like showing him directions and stuff like that. So once again, I'd love to kind of really fully break down his powers and understand what he's capable of. It seems like another interesting thing they're setting up is that lady Louise, who's a scientist lady. I forgot what the place is that she actually works, but she was studying, like a rover was on the moon, which Gorgon, like I said, I keep doing that. I'm sorry. Ended up smashing it with his hoof and everything. And she's like, oh, that looks like a hoof. Even though, like, on the moon, they're like, no one's going to know that's a hoof. And then she was cut to her saying, oh, that looks like a hoof. And so basically, she noticed all this stuff around Earth. It's like there's this energy that, like, happens just as, like, stuff was happening on the moon. It just happens to happen here on Earth, too. Basically, she was recognizing when Lockjaw was teleporting all four of them here to Earth. So it seems like she might be in the center of this going forward. She might be kind of like the human liaison in a sense, probably going to, she kind of had to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna take some few days off, kind of get my head straight, because her boss thinks she's kind of crazy. She's like super smart, but it's like, oh, the way you're acting, you're talking about this and all stuff like that, like, oh, something from the moon came here to Earth or whatever. So I don't know, I'm very interested to see what they do with her in the story too. But it's definitely going to be interesting going forward, since the fact is that Maximus now has basically all of the people in Adelant on his side and everything. So it's definitely going to be interesting seeing things go forward, because even if Black Bolt returns, like so many people are already on his side, is there any real way to pull them back? Also, the fact is that he's also got that kid, I didn't catch his name, but at the very beginning, like it was pretty apparent, like, oh yeah, that kid has the power to see the future and stuff like that. It's not clear cut. It seems like he kind of gets a rough look at things, because when he was talking about the whole like him, I'm sorry, Maximus being pushed up against the wall by snakes, and those snakes ended up being Medusa's hair, which makes sense though. Medusa's situation, snakes, all that jazz, and you get what I'm trying to say. So, and also about that guy is like, oh yeah, he'll be laying in a beautiful river of water or whatever, and it's like, oh, he died on some rocks with his blood pooling and stuff like that. So it seems like there's some interpretation needed. Also, there's a whole council situation apparently them planning Maximus' death. Nevertheless, I'm curious to see what his role in all of this is too. Because you do have like Maximus being like, I'm not trying to, telling Crystal like he's not going to be a kind of leader who basically leads by fear and being like vicious. He doesn't want to do that. But it's like, you say that, but here you are doing a coup where you're trying to kill essentially your family, including the woman you love. It's like, it's more so, it's like he wants Medusa back. But it's like, yeah, definitely out of anybody, it's like definitely kill Gorgon and my brother. I mean, he would be wise to kill Karkanak as well, considering the fact is that he was the one that was like, yo, I know you don't want to think about this, but your brother, you need to deal with him. I know you're thinking you're being tough on him, but you're not, because you're kind of doing soft punches. You need to like put him in his place before he ends up betraying, because he kind of called it. So it's like, but Maximus doesn't know about that. I guess Maximus want him alive because I guess he'd make a very good tactician or something like that. I don't know. Like, we would just have to wait to see where like everything kind of like goes from here about like any of that, so like I said, overall a very good premiere. I do already know a lot of this stuff about the show, like in the sense of like how people have received the show so far, and ultimately I will respond it by saying like, honestly, I don't care. There are plenty of things that I like that people don't like, and it's fun. Like, I mean, that's just how things are. Like, people are like, this is the worst show, this is not. At the end of the day, I don't know, and I don't care. I'll sit down and watch the show. I'll build my own opinion. Like, I'm not going to be too concerned about other people. But so far, I really like it. I'm very interested to see how it plays out. I do know that it's a short season. It's only going to be 8 episodes. Also, like I said, it state that the show's in. I don't know whether that's going to be more beyond that or not. Ultimately, that would be determined by ABC after it's all said and done. So, but like I said, I'm very much looking forward to seeing what Inhumans has in store for this season. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.